Hello, everyone. A very important Supreme Court case, oral arguments were heard today in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus BRUEN. A lot of people have been asking what my thoughts were, and I want to kind of give you my thoughts, but I'm also going to reference over and suggest that you watch a few things. So, I am just a normal person. I feel like I'm fairly educated when it comes to what's going on, and I've read from and taken resources and looked at various other opinions that I've seen on the internet from people that I respect. And it's those people that I'm going to be drawing my own personal opinions and maybe trying to make it more palatable for the average person to understand. Because Cody, he's a great guy, very educated. Some of the stuff he says goes over my head, and if it's going over my head, it's probably going over a lot of the average person who isn't deeply invested in every single thing that's going on. So we're going to kind of dive into what went down with the oral arguments and what we think is going to happen. So before we get going, though, I do want to say thank you to everyone that supports this channel. Earlier today, I uploaded a video and there were some problems with YouTube. I had to delete it and then re-upload it. And because of that, it's most likely going to tank in the algorithm. So after you watch this video, can you please go watch that video if it entices you? We 3D printed an AR-15 in the state of California. I don't know. So New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus BRUEN, what was this? This was a Supreme Court case challenging the May issue scheme of how New York actually issues concealed carry permits. Now, if you're in probably like something like 40 something states in the United States, it's fairly easy to get a CCW. Many states don't even require it. They just say, hey, if you can legally own a gun, you can legally carry a gun. States like California and New Jersey and New York have what's considered a May issue. So even if you are a law-abiding citizen, and I use that term begrudgingly, if you have not broken any laws, you have every legal right to carry a gun, you complete all the training, are of good moral character, pass a background check, pass whatever evaluations you have to do, you can still be denied because the sheriff or the chief law enforcement officer or whoever is in charge of issuing the permits deems that you should not get one because you don't show any special or good cause that would make you out of the ordinary from the normal citizen. This court case was challenging that in New York because it's essentially, it's almost impossible to get a non-restricted permit. Some of the arguments that they made throughout against the Second Amendment were that there are something like 40 or 50,000 people potentially that have a CCW permit in New York, varying levels of restrictions, but they were saying, hey, we did actually issue some permits. Now, when challenged upon this, when they challenged their opinions on whether or not they should use the historical outlook of it or just whether or not they can actually restrict these rights or whether or not they actually do have the right to carry or when you would actually more likely to need it, the person that was actually defending the state and arguing in favor of these restrictions seemed like they weren't really well prepared. At certain points, it seemed as if they were conceding to the fact that the right to carry a firearm outside the home does exist, and that they weren't saying that you have no right whatsoever. They were just arguing that the way that they do it doesn't restrict your rights. I'm not sure how you can reconcile the fact and say that you believe people do actually have a right to exercise their right to keep and bear arms, bear being the main thing in New York, when the permit process is as difficult as it is. At several points, they mention that, we give permits to people that are in more rural areas because there's less police there. But then the justices argued that potentially you would be more likely to need a concealed carry permit in those more populous areas like New York City. Even though in New York City, it's impossible to get a CCW. I'm speaking, I'm exaggerating a little bit because I'm sure there's one person, but it's essentially impossible to get a CCW in the more large cities. And I think that that was what they were trying to argue, is that there isn't a right to carry in those cities because there's so many police. When it's quite the opposite. People in rural areas are probably less likely to need a firearm on average. Now, the situations where they would need a firearm, it is very much arguable that they are further away from police response. So there's, they can argue that point. But when we actually listened to the people that were arguing in favor of the Second Amendment, in favor of New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, I thought that they were so well spoken. It went so well as far as how they answered the questions. They were very well prepared. They were able to argue the specific point without getting too run off. And I've seen some court cases where they've kind of had a hard time answering the questions, but it seems as if everything was done very well. And I'm very hopeful. Me personally, I think, and many other people would probably argue, that this will end up being either a 6-3 or a 5-4 in favor of the Second Amendment. Now, what would that mean for places like California, like many of you are probably watching me? Well, nothing as of immediately if a positive decision is heard, and I wouldn't expect anything prior to like July. That's what some people are speculating, but who knows? So this is not going to mean that as of today, you can go out and just conceal carry a firearm and disregard the law. I mean, you could, but the government doesn't like that. You have the right to keep and bear arms regardless of whatever the law says. But if you want to follow the law, you're still going to have to abide by the laws as they currently stand. If this is favorable, however, it could potentially turn many counties that are currently restrictive into shall issue states. And that's something that Justice Kavanaugh was actually referencing. And I think that's one of the first times we've seen a Supreme Court case actually use the words shall issue, as far as I'm aware of. But it was very interesting to see him mention favorably the shall issue states. So if something like this is positive, it could be used as potential grounds for other court cases in the state of California to build off of and say, hey, shall issue. That's how you got to do it. But it's not going to be anything immediate. So we will see how this pans out years down the road. That being said, you have to make your own choices on how you choose to live your life. What do you choose to try to get caught with or caught without? Do you choose to get caught with a gun unlawfully? Or do you choose to get caught without a gun in a situation where you would need one? That's entirely up to you. I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. Please go check out some of the links down in the description to see some of the references that I took, whether it's SCOTUS blog, whether it was The Truth About Guns and their 40-minute conversation with various actual lawyers. I think that would be an excellent one to go take a look at. I listened to it. It was a great listen. If you want to listen to the entire court oral arguments, you can. I'll have that link down below, as well as the transcripts if you want to read it. Not sure why you would want to read it unless you're specifically referencing certain parts, but it's something you can do. You guys know the drill. Have fun, be safe, stay dangerous. Peace.